If you look at overall what the internet was developed to be and what it actually is being used to do now, it was never intended to be a tool of commerce. It's hard to tack on security as an afterthought if all of the basics and the underlying structure of it is not sound. It's like trying to build a house and your foundation is not good. Hackers will always be at an advantage.
Every day this week, major websites have been outmaneuvered and outmuscled by someone who wanted to take them down.
We at the FBI began to receive reports about a threat to the internet, the distributed denial of service attacks.
I don't think we should interrupt the energy of the internet by doing it top down and suggesting that mandates and directives be imposed on the private sector.
When the operation of the internet openness, Mr. Chairman, is always accompanied by a degree of risk.
Unfortunately, my parents were divorced. My dad, he was a businessman. He owned a very successful business. So his mind was preoccupied a lot, getting a lot of phone calls. He was anxious to give me stuff to keep me occupied while I was with him. I was 6 years old when I got my first computer. I remember my dad plopping it down, and the first moment I powered it up, just hearing it churning and making all the bleeping sounds, waiting for my commands. I knew this would play a major role down the line in my life. The possibilities really seemed endless. I was always into puzzles and building. I really loved Lego, and the appeal behind Lego was the fact that you can construct anything from it. I never bought the ones that come with like the build guide. Just having that blank canvas and using my imagination, putting blocks together to create something. Between 6 and 9, I was reading programming books, construction books, hardware, software. I like challenges. I like to know the way things work. Reverse engineering is a huge aspect of the way my brain works. There's been a lot of speculation about where the term hacker originated. Some students at MIT were working on model trains, and they would modify it to do something else other than what it was originally intended to do. Maybe somebody sees a straight line, I see a circle. I would say the first time I accessed the internet was probably the most exciting point in my life. It validated a lot for me. Other people were using computers and wanting to share information and discuss. Just to find out that there's a whole community behind this was really exciting for me. It took a little bit of a turn when I realized that the AOL trial that I had was only 30 days long. So I had to be a little bit crafty and come up with a way to stay online. I was like a nuisance of a child, a bit of an instigator. I would go into these chats on the AOL trial, making fun of everybody in the chat, and one guy came about and he's like, yeah, sorry, you need to go. And I was like, what are you gonna do about it? And he did something at the time that was called a punt. He punted me offline. And at that point I was like, what happened? Because my connection to AOL was severed, so I had no idea how someone somewhere across the globe was able to cut my connection from AOL. And I think that for me was probably, that eureka moment where I was really intrigued that someone had the power and the capability of doing that. So I went around researching, and I found a program called AOL, which had, a bunch of crafty tools in it, including the famous punt. I realized that, I had a few days left on the trial. I had to come up with something to ensure that I was going to be able to stay online. In one of the formats of the tool was an option to appear as an administrator on AOL. I was able to appear as an administrator on AOL, and I asked a bunch of people saying, due to a power outage, I would need to verify your login name and your password. The first 4 out of 4, I logged off and I logged into their account just to check to make sure it was the right password. And lo and behold, I had unlimited internet access at that point. Realizing that you can manipulate people to do what you want, that was really the beginning of the rabbit hole for me. I was 9 years old. My second passion and my leading passion in life is also video games. I didn't know if my dad was going to be able to start buying me all kinds of video games and stuff like that, so I really needed to find a method of getting these games without paying. And someone suggested I go on something called IRC chat, which was known as Internet Relay Chat. I logged on to a whole new world. I found channels that served the exact purpose that I needed. There was a channel for music, a channel for video games, a channel for software. So a new problem arose when I realized that I wasn't the only one trying to get video games for free. I noticed at the top it said that it was a hacker group that was running this channel and they were in the process of recruitment. When I spoke to the leader of the hacker group, he suggested that, like, look, you're too young for this. You have no experience. Why should I even explore the idea of letting you in our group? And I had to make a plea with him, basically saying I'm a very hungry type of person, and he had basically no choice to give me a chance, and he let me in the hacker group. My role was hacking into other sites and networks and using their bandwidth to create what was known as an XDCC bot that offers out the games and the programs. After I had proved my worth, I was recruited by TNT Force, the most elite hacker group in the world at that point. I was 13 years old. Everything seemed normal on the outside, nobody knew. So I would spend a lot of my time doing this at night and not really sleeping. I would sleep the first 2 classes of school every day just to make sure I can stay up late at night, to get the job done. In my high school, I was in a computer course where it was very simplistic programming. And for the teacher, I would write specific code on the board. We were learning in Pascal, which is a pretty simple language. And I was writing on the board in C, and she's like, well, I didn't teach you to write in C. It wasn't adding up for her, but would to suspect what? That I would go home and be taking out university networks in my spare time? It just didn't seem realistic, I guess. The name Mafia Boy originated from my brother, actually. He used my system from time to time, and one day I logged in after he had used the computer. I forgot to check the name and see what name was used, and I logged in and it showed Mafia Boy. And something about the name grew on me. I found it to be aggressive, intimidating, and when you're a hacker, these are the exact traits that you want. I like to personally correlate hacking with a drug. Just that moment when you breach a network and you have administrator access, it was intoxicating. For me, the excitement drove me to succeed. And at around this point, a new type of attack had emerged, and it was called denial of service. So I started establishing different teams to write different sorts of tools. What you're doing is essentially hacking so many networks and setting up the master and the slaves. You input a command to the master. It then relays that same command to all the slaves, transmitting packets and fake requests to your target, overwhelming him with so much data that the server shuts off. Today, it's more monetary, and whereas when I was hacking back in the day, it was all about notoriety. That was the end game, and that was the goal. The truth was, I wanted something that was so effective. It was undeniable how effective it was. It's kind of like when you create a beast, you just don't know how strong it is yet. So I had to pick a target and basically figure out, what am I working with here? And at the time, Yahoo had the biggest search engine in the world. The truth is when I launched the first attack, I wasn't even at my computer. I had set up a timer. I had it run while I was in school. That's when, really the pandemonium started.
A large number of computers gang up on the Yahoo infrastructure and ask them to do more things than they could ever do.
I didn't know how to feel at that moment. I was massively excited, but I knew, it was so powerful, and I can feel it starting to consume me already at that point, because it was so intoxicating, the amount of power I had. That's where things started to get interesting. I pushed all my chips in and I was going for it one way or another. So in succession, I started knocking down high-profile sites. Everybody that I just wanted to shut down at the flick of a button was gone.
Definitely an outside source that's coming in and attempting to attack eBay. We're now in constant communication with state and federal officials.
From beginning to end, I'd estimate it was about 8 days. This was during the year 2000. The e-commerce boom was happening. Everybody, stock investors, people were investing in all kinds of web tech companies. The stocks dropped, people sold. The overall initial assessment was $1.7 billion damaged in the attacks launched by me, a 15-year-old. I did all of this on dial-up at my dad's house in my room at night. After launching the attacks and everything I had done, I had never had a sense of worry. But when I saw President Clinton go on TV and talk about what I had done, that was really alarming to me. This kind of drew the line in sand. I was like, holy I'm in big trouble here. This is not a joke. There was 16 FBI task forces after me. There was tons of people skimming through data. There was informants on IRC chat leaking them information. So I was getting attacked from all angles. But overall, they did get lucky because my login name to my previous ISP was Mafia Boy. When they came for the arrest, it was a Friday night. I was watching the movie Goodfellas at my friend's house. I get a phone call, it's like 2:33 in the morning. And then when I saw that it was my dad calling, I'm like, hello? Just from that moment, just from the tone of his voice, I knew immediately that they had come. He told me that they wanted me to go wait at the corner of the street and wait for them to come arrest me. Ultimately, I ended up receiving an 8-month sentence, and I had to pay a fine of $250. Throughout the whole course of the trial, I was not allowed computer access. Kind of made it difficult, but probably not being able to see my 3 best friends was pretty tough at that point. A lot has changed. I was forced to grow up like instantly. There is a general classification for a hacker, and it's based on 3 colors: black, gray, and white. Black is obviously you do malicious things. Gray is you're somewhere in the middle. You have some ethics, but you kind of dabble a little bit on the dark side of things too. And white hat is a pure security expert who develops and prevents threats from being successful. I make a similar comparison to banks and how banks get robbed. Hiring an ex-bank robber might be beneficial to you simply because you hire a security team, you're a bank owner, you bring them to your vault, and they're like, okay, well, like, let's barricade the walls here, make sure the vault has the craziest lock mechanism, and we're good. Whereas you hire an ex-bank robber and he comes in and he's like, that's great, don't care about this vault, don't care about these walls, I'm coming in through the floor. When you compare how it was back then to today, I think it's a lot easier to access networks and sensitive information. Simply because when you look at the size of a program 15 years ago, we're talking 20, 30,000 lines of code if it was a very complex program. Now you look at programs today, they're millions of lines of code. And that's what a hacker is essentially doing, looking through code and looking for a mistake that a human made. Whether it's your phone, whether it's your printer, whether it's your computer, any piece of technology could be compromised. I think the growth of the internet technology as a whole is probably maybe the biggest problem that we have today. Simply because everything is rushed to market, they don't worry about fixing predecessor technology. All they care about is releasing new technology. So certain flaws and bugs might exist. The fact that we're not taking our time to develop things that are structurally sound, you get something that has tons of holes in it. This is exactly why it's a hacker's paradise right now. Everything is getting hacked. You can't even go one day without reading about some big breach or some big hack. The majority of hackers are more concerned about money and what can they gain from this. Due to the fact that all information, data is all being transmitted on networks, computers, servers, cloud. When you factor all this in, it's literally a playground for them. There's so many ways to make money through manipulation of technology, and that's the goal, that's the end game for them. Everybody thinks they're not a target. Like, why me? Like, what do I have? And the reality is that you don't need to be a target. The second you access the internet, you're granted an IP address, and that alone is worth something. Whether it be for your internet bandwidth, maybe you do online banking. There's several different means of getting information through you. Essentially, it's all the same in the sense that you're looking for an exploit. When I was 9 years old on AOL, getting people's passwords and logins, the same concept still exists today in a much greater form, except now you're targeting an accountant of a very powerful company, and you socially engineering her via an email, getting her to click a specific link, which grants you access to the corporate network. You could be trailing an employee, checking his routine, seeing where he's going. And if it's him using a train to get to work every day, you could access the train router and set it up in a sense that he gets boot off and then he connects to another access point, unknowingly that the access point is your laptop. And the second he goes to work and then plugs in that computer, the whole company's been breached. The exploit is the human being. If you've been robbed, to me at least personally, I don't care about the belongings because they can all be replaced. It's the feeling you get when someone's been in your personal space and that feeling you get when that happens. And to me, it's a similar instance where if you've been hacked, someone's looking through all your private emails, your sensitive information, that to me is a disturbing factor. And for some reason, it doesn't weigh in on people that way. The same way when I was hacking, it was hard to feel remorse and be ethical about it. I feel like on the other side of the spectrum, it's the same thing. They don't feel it because it's a computer crime. The emotion is not there, but they have to realize that so much information, so much data is being put out there and being stolen and being used against you. In today's day and age, you have to care. Information is being traded like a commodity, and it's up to you to protect your information. The thing about a computer is that it empowers the user to basically do whatever your wishes are. It's probably the most innovative piece of technology that we may have ever created. The internet and computers were not intended to be used criminally. I don't think that was the intention when it was created. Where someone sees good, someone might see bad. All the PC does is empower you. Empower you for good or bad, it's up to you to make that decision.